Today, we're diving into one of the biggest challenges in medicine, trying to repair the spinal cord. You know, for so long, a major spinal injury was, well, it was permanent. But what if it didn't have to be? What if we could use the body's own master cells to actually fix what's broken? This is the big question, the one that scientists have been chasing for decades. Can we use stem cells to basically re-insulate a damaged spinal cord and help someone walk again? It sounds like something straight out of a movie, I know, but the science behind it is very, very real. So, to really get the solution, we have to understand the problem. Think about the nerves in your spinal cord like they're a massive bundle of electrical wires. A spinal injury often strips away their protective coating, the stuff called the myelin sheath. And when that insulation is gone, the signals from your brain just get lost or scrambled. It's like a biological short circuit, and that's a huge reason why paralysis happens. Okay, so how do you fix a short-circuited wire? Well, you re-insulate it, right? Back in 2005, a team of scientists did a landmark study where they tried to do exactly that, but in rats who had spinal cord injuries. The plan they had was really elegant and simple. First, they gave the rats a very specific, controlled spinal injury. Then, and this is key, just 7 days later, they injected a special type of human stem cell. These are called OPCs for short, and you can just think of them as tiny insulation-making factories. That's their job. Then for the next several weeks, they just watched. They carefully scored how well the rats could move. And the results? Well, they were a huge deal. Here's a quote right from the paper. The animals that got the stem cells had way more re-insulation around their nerves, and, critically, they got a lot of their ability to move back. And this chart just lays it all out, crystal clear. The rats that got the stem cells, that's the first bar, they scored way higher on a standard scale for movement. They were just moving better, period. The other group, the ones who didn't get the cells, they just kind of stalled out. So the evidence was pretty undeniable. For these rats, this treatment really worked. But, you know, science is never quite that easy. It turned out there was a catch. A really big one, actually. And it was a discovery that showed that when it comes to this kind of repair, timing is absolutely everything. So this led them to the next obvious question. What about older injuries? I mean, most people with spinal cord injuries have been living with them for months or even years. Would this amazing insulation strategy work for them too? The answer, as you can see here, was a pretty blunt no. When they ran the exact same experiment, but this time they waited 10 months after the injury, nothing happened. No new myelin and no improvement in movement. It was like the window of opportunity had slammed shut. So why? What was going on? Well, it all comes down to how the body reacts to a major injury over time. It forms this dense, tangled mess of scar tissue right at the injury site. It's called a glial scar, and it basically acts like a biological roadblock. It physically stops the new stem cells from getting in and doing their job. Now, that discovery was a total game changer. It showed everyone that it's not just what you transplant, but when you transplant it that's so important. So armed with that crucial piece of information, the research took the next logical step forward. They moved from rats to a model that's a whole lot closer to us. So fast forward to 2012, a new study comes out, this time using common marmosets, and they also used a different, really powerful type of stem cell called an iPSC. Basically, you can take an adult cell, like a skin cell, and reprogram it, hit the reset button to turn it back into a stem cell. And crucially, they did the transplant 9 days after the injury, right inside that critical therapeutic window. This table gives us a great snapshot of how the science really leveled up. You can see the move from rats to primates, from one cell type to another. But look at that last row. The key finding was different. The rat study was all about that re-insulation, right? But the primate study, it found something else was going on, something much more complex. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting, because in the marmosets, it turned out that simply re-insulating the wires was not the whole picture, not even close. It turns out those transplanted stem cells weren't just acting like little electricians. No, they were acting more like a full-service repair crew. They helped more of the original nerves survive the trauma in the first place. They protected the insulation that was already there from getting worse. They helped new blood vessels grow, which is critical for healing. And maybe most importantly, they pumped out all these helpful chemicals that basically created a healthier environment that encouraged recovery. So yeah, re-insulation was part of it, but the stem cells were doing so much more. So we've gone from rats to primates, from a simple fix to this really complex picture of healing. What does all of this actually mean for the future? What's the takeaway here for treating people?
Okay, so first things first, timing is everything. That scar tissue is a real problem, and getting in there early seems to be the key. Second, stem cells are amazing multitaskers. It's not just about replacing what's lost, it's about protecting and supporting what's still there. Third, these studies we've talked about were absolutely essential. They're the reason we have early stage human trials happening right now. And finally, and this is important, we have to keep our expectations in check. This is all incredibly promising, but it is not a cure. The therapy is still experimental, and in the human trials, the results have been mixed.
And that kind of leads to the last big thought here. This whole line of research, it's not just about the spinal cord. It's about learning the body's own secret language of repair, the signals, the cells, all the cues it uses to try and heal itself. And it makes you wonder, right? If we can really master that language, if we can learn to guide the body's own incredible healing power, what else could we mend? It's a question that's going to keep scientists busy for a long, long time.